You're listening to the tale of two podcasters from the 2007 Rab TGO Challenge, brought to you by theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
This podcast is just one of a special series produced from a wealth of recordings made in May 2007 by two backpackers, Andy Howell and me, Bob Cartwright, as we made our way via two different routes from the west to the east coast of Scotland as part of the 2007 Rab TGO Challenge.
Here at Rab, we're pleased to be involved in the TGO Challenge, which is the perfect testing ground for our clothing and sleeping bags. Rab has a Scottish heritage and over 25 years' experience of making gear that performs in the varied weather of the Highlands, as well as gear for the highest peaks in the Himalaya.
Co-sponsors TGO, the Great Outdoors magazine, have been behind this May event since its inception in 1980. The framework and principle is totally unique. It isn't a race or a competition of any kind. The objective is to foster good fellowship amongst walkers within the framework of a challenging 200-mile expedition. The start consists of a series of sign-out locations on the west coast, from Torridon in the north down to Ardrishaig in the south. Each challenger, solo, couple or group makes their way via a high route, a low route or a mixture of the two across Scotland to finish anywhere between Arbroath and Fraserburgh on the east coast. There's a set 2-week window to do this in, and each participant submits their route for inspection prior to departure for safety and advice reasons. The places, however, are limited to 300, and details about the event, entry forms, past stories and photographs can be found in the October issue of TGO magazine and on their website. Each participant makes the challenge as easy or as hard as they wish. The extremes can be a remote high route, crossing wild country and not seeing another soul for days on end. Or a route which takes in the many social events, perhaps not camping at all and just using established accommodation all the way. Most people do a mixture of the two in different forms. This year I started with my wife Rose in the beautiful village of Ploughton, and Andy Howell with his partner Kate started from Strathcarron. We both carried recorders with us to capture our audio diaries and conversations which took place with other walkers as well as locals as we made our way to the east coast. Yes, this is the tale and adventures of two podcasters.
Well, we're just coming out of Ploughton. We've crossed the bay and we're heading up towards Loch Lundy, and I always like to try and do a piece during the first climb because your body's getting used to the rucksack again and you're getting into the vibe of the challenge. The weather is very good, very good, very bright at the moment. However, the big negative, which we've just discovered coming through the wood here, is the midges are out, and they're out early. Now, with midges, it's normally the male midge that hatches first, then the female midge, and it's the female ones which cause the most damage because they're the ones that bite the most. However, the male ones seem to have taken a certain liking to me already, which is a little bit of a disappointment, and sadly I do tend to attract the bugs. Make of that what you will. So, with this good weather, there comes a little bit of a downside, and it would appear to be the midges. Without going into a long gear list like I did last year, we'll talk about gear and things as we go along and things that we're using. But on this particular crossing, we're splitting it into two sections because Rose has to go back after the first week, and so we're doing it sharing equipment, and then I'll swap over to a tarp tent for the second half. One of the other big changes gear-wise this year, which is I think be interesting to comment on as we go along, is I've made the final step to Terox. Yes, Innovate Terox. I've been trying to wear a pair of boots in for the last few weeks and months, and no matter how many times I did, some Gemini Acus, great boots, but I just have feet that just don't appreciate boots, I think. And no matter what pair I've worn over the years, by either Mindles or Scarpas, nothing's ever fitted as I would like it to. So I've got Terox on, I've got my Footlight socks, and at the moment everything is dry, but I have to say the first time I put the Terox on, it felt very, very comfortable indeed. First time really, to be honest, in my particular case, I put a pair of shoes on, or boots or trainers, and they just fitted like a glove. So the fitting being the main part, that's on and sorted. Now we're going to see what it's like to get your feet wet when you do the river crossings and such like. As we traverse, well, we've just come out the path and we've hit the stile for the road, so we'll have to have a quick look at the map and work out where the next path is. But so far so good. Lovely morning, everything's looking very bright and positive. Just met up with Ian White, and I can see Maggie Hems behind us. So the collective group is starting to stretch their way out as they head towards Loch Lundy. It's 1:15, 1:30ish now. We've been going for about 3 hours, and we've stopped for our famous first brew, and it's always the first brew of the trip that is a great pleasure normally, as you feel like you're sort of starting to get yourself into it, and the memories of yesterday's travel to get here, and also the previous day trying to finish everything at work, is starting to become a bit of a memory, and you get into the vibe of the challenge. Now, as you can hear, we've actually we're not that much in the wilds. We've come over from Plockton, a nice walk through the woods and down past Loch Lundy and another loch there, over to Balmacara Square. Balmacara is a beautiful little spot. They had a little duck pond there and a visitor centre. Very, very quiet as we went through, and actually would have been a nice place for a brew, but the weather was not on our side. And when I say that, I say, I mean, it's low cloud, it's drizzle, a bit grey, the wind is chilled, and it's the sort of weather that you think, well, I'll just go on to the next place and the next place and the next place before you actually stop and have a bit of a break. But this particular route that we're taking is taking us, as I say, off-road, and then we're back down to the A57, which we're now about to join, and then walk along to the Dorney Inn, which is a couple of miles along the road. As walks go, as an introductory walk, it's a bit frustrating. I think Rose and I are both saying that you have this feeling you want to get going and get started, and as you're walking through sort of wooded, undulated land and you don't see anything, you don't really feel like you've started just yet. And I do know that once we get to the Dorney Inn and then set off up the side of Loch Long, I think it'll start to come together then, because we'll feel more remote fairly quickly. The downside has been that, as I mentioned earlier, these midges are only about in short supply, but they are about, and as I say, we've just stopped for our first brew, and already they're swarming around us, and it just makes for an unpleasant stop where you'd normally stop and rest for a while. You just want to have your brew and get going again, and these little things get into your ears and up your nose and all the rest of it. Although they're not swarming, there's certainly enough of them to make it uncomfortable. But we've seen some nice wildlife on the way. We've seen some nice flowers and various things which indicate springtime's in a slightly different time up here. What have we seen, Rose?
Oh, all sorts. It's interesting. The bluebells are just coming out in force here, and ours are just finishing at home. But there's still quite a lot of the springtime flowers about, primroses and violets through the woodland, and the wood anemones are coming out. Greater Stitchworth, celandine, all there, all looking beautiful. So it has been a real pleasure to walk through, nevertheless.
And like everybody else in the country, apparently the weather was very, very good up here a few weeks ago, and it sort of brought everything on, I think. And in fact, the locals were saying it actually was too hot for spring to do any work, but certainly cold in the evenings. So, you know, Scotland's been like everybody else. The weather's changing slightly, and the weather pattern's changing, and the seasons are changing somewhat. Hence these midges being out slightly earlier than normal, I suppose. So we're going to have a finish up this brew and a bar of chocolate, and then get packed again and get going down to the Dorney Inn. Might have a bit of food down there, and then we'll start the trek up Loch Long, and then the path that takes us hopefully to the top of the range there to find us a place to camp. But we'll switch back on a bit later on and see how we're getting on. So here we are at the end of day one. The tent is up. It's 9 o'clock or 9:30ish. What time is it? It's 10 past 9, and we're lying in our little lovely, snuggly Rab sleeping bags, thinking, right, we better get a podcast done and get the last piece done for the day, and just review where we are, what we've done, and how we've ended up where we've ended up. We continue down the road to the Dorney Inn, where the famous castle is there that's in all the photographs, Eileen Donnan, I think it's pronounced, and then we turn left by the side of Loch Long, and then right again up the River Glennon, aiming to go as high as we could possibly before we camped. Very, very wet underfoot and slushy. Weather was overcast. Temperature kept going up and down, but not too drastically. And it did rain fairly heavily at one stage. But the Dorney area is a beautiful area, beautiful long road of houses. But going on the previous conversations, it was fairly obvious just how many of them were holiday cottages as we went past, which is a great shame in many respects, although understandable, I suppose. For future reference, anybody taking this route, there is only one camping spot at along the River Glennon, and we've got it, and it's right at the top, just before the gully. It's very, very hard going with the heather and the heather roots, very wet and sodden underfoot wherever you go to try and find a camping spot. And then just before the gully, it all levels out, and the stream, or the beginning of the river, if you like, somehow runs underground, and thankfully there's an area here that you could probably pitch 2 or 3 tents. It's pretty rocky, but as you can probably hear in the background, there is no wind whatsoever, so we're sheltered, and the way we pitch the tent won't cause us any problems during the night if the wind does pick up. The tail rocks performed very, very well. My feet got wet naturally. Did it bother me? Not in the slightest. Apart from the initial rush of cold when the first batch of cold water hit my feet. We had to zigzag across the river about a dozen times, and it just was easy for a change just to walk straight across the river and not worry about wet feet and changing feet and boots and that sort of thing. So whereas Rose was still treading carefully so she didn't go above her ankles of her boots, so she wasn't wearing any gaiters, it didn't bother me at all with the tail rocks. But probably the most interesting comment I can make on them at the moment is the fact that as the toe area is hinged, where you would normally put your foot against a steep incline, like for example a rock on a slope that you're clambering over, and your boot doesn't flex, this flexes completely, and you really do feel confident. You've got a good grip on the stone, and my feet don't feel particularly bruised or hammered or mistreated in any way compared to the first day of using boots on the challenge generally. So far, very positive on that, but I'll come back to that a bit later on. Now, I'm just trying to bring Rose into this before she falls asleep, because she's still wearing half her clothing. She's tucked in the sleeping bag. How was your first day?
It was great, actually. I mean, for me, I still think it's just a privilege to walk through the landscape. I just love looking at everything. I'm just nosy, basically. But I mean, today too, apart from all the plants and all the other bits and pieces, there's been all the spring lambs out. We've seen calves and a gorgeous little foal and some piglets even. And then walking up the gully, there were baby frogs coming all the way up. So it's a real pleasure just to see everything, and just keep looking and saying, "Oh, look at this! And have you seen this?" And Bob gets a bit fed up, but yes, dear, and trundles on.
It's like sharing a walking trip with Bill Oddie. It really is. So that was the trip up here. Thankfully, we were both getting quite worried, weren't we, about finding a camping spot?
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to find anywhere. It was like, oh no, I'm so tired. Can we stop now?
And you get to that point where you are just so tired, and it was the right time to stop. But then the panic sets in. You actually can't find a space. So tomorrow's route should take us over the top, where we expect it to be boggy, but at least we feel sorted now. We had supper of green Thai curry.
Watched by an army of slugs. Where are the black slugs all come from in Scotland? There's always black slugs everywhere.
And what we're doing, we've brought 2 cooking systems with us to compare the two for the experience, really. One is the jet boil system, the personal jet boil system, which is running off a 100 gas cart, and the other is the peak ignition,
which I'm using with the 250.
Which is running off the 250. Rose is using that with a tea light mug, and obviously the jet boil system is complete with its container and so on. And we're just comparing boil times and using them alternately to see how long the gas lasts, because a little 100 cart wouldn't last very long with something like the peak ignition. And so far, I'm very impressed with the speed of the cooking of the jet boil and the efficiency of it all. We've made pot cosies for both of the cooking systems, and what we've done with the dehydrated food, we added some water a few hours ago, some cold water or lukewarm water when we had that brew, and we then boiled it up once we got ourselves sorted. The boil lasted no longer than a minute. Threw in some rice, which had already been cooked and dehydrated as well. Then put it in a pot cosy for 10 minutes, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it was wonderful.
It came back. Yeah. What I really like too is I left my tea light mug in the pot cosy, and it kept it warm, insulated, because often I found in the past, this time of the evening, your food you can't eat it quick enough because it goes cold and you end up eating cold food. But it was piping hot right to the end. I was still blowing it right at the bottom of the tea light mug. So that was an added advantage I hadn't really considered.
But the cosy system is proving itself to be very fuel effective and fuel efficient. So that's interesting to see if that keeps going that way as we travel along. So we're bedded down now. We're snuggled into our Rab Quantums, and the tent is... what tent are we using?
The Lightwave.
We're using the Lightwave T2 Ultra, which is incredibly roomy inside. Well, I should imagine it's a bit like a Nano, actually. But we've got stacks of space. We've unloaded the 2 rucksacks. They're all passed. Everything's down the side of us, and we're still plenty of space for both of us.
There's a nice sort of awning too that you can cook in bad weather, so it works really well.
And the reason we haven't left anything out the front is because there are so many slugs. We just can't be bothered trying to sort out the sliminess tomorrow. So, anyway, that pretty well wraps up day 1. I hope that's not been too boring for you. As usual, we haven't seen anybody to speak to, other challenges, but we'll start bumping into those probably tomorrow afternoon onwards, I'd guess, as we go down Glenafric rather. And we'll see how we get on. We're aiming for the Glenafric YHA tomorrow if we can, but if we make it in good time, we might pass on through and go and camp down by Loch Affric if we can, but we'll see how we get on tomorrow. So fingers crossed the weather will still hold, and we'll be switching back on when we get going tomorrow morning.
It's the end of day 1, and it's been a good day. The weather wasn't bad. We had some gentle breezes, a little bit of rain, some sun, but certainly nothing bad. In fact, it was almost ideal walking weather, and we've now got to a lovely little high loch, Loch Moy-Keen. There's no one around anywhere. It's almost perfect wild campsite. Fantastic day. Kate, day 1 of Challenge 1. Have you had a good time?
Yeah, I have. We've had a very good day. It's nice to have achieved what we set out to do, and it's been lovely walking, beautiful surroundings. So I've actually thoroughly enjoyed it.
Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about the gear in a couple of days' time, but by and large it's worked well?
Yes, I'm pleased with what I've got. both what I've been wearing and what I've been carrying. It's all been comfortable and seems to have suited its purpose. So far so good.
Well, we've done about 24 kilometres today and climbed just short of 800 metres, although the watch is telling me it's about 1,000, but there you go. And it was quite an interesting route. We went through the Atterdale Forest to Ben Dronaig Lodge, where we found the most amazing bothy, and it's maintained by the estate, and it was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very pretty bothy, very well appointed, has a flushing toilet, which was fantastic, and a couple of fireplaces. It was very clean. It was very nice, very pleasant place to find.
Yeah, and yes, there was a lovely notice on the wall saying, this is not a holiday cottage. People stay here normally 2 or 3 days, but you can see why they'd had to put that sign up there. And from there, we walked around to Loch KV, I think it is, and then crossed a load of peat hags, our first peat hags and first peat bogs, to cut off the long walk to Pate Lodge. Quite good fun.
Yeah, it was good fun. Peat hags, peat bogs are an acquired taste, I suppose you might say. And you wouldn't want to be spending a whole day doing that, but an hour or so of it in the afternoon for the sake of the last part of the day being a little bit higher and being able to camp here tonight was definitely worth it. Yeah, it's been good.
Yes, and it was quite exciting. I only went into the peat bog up to my hips once, probably once too much, but and then we climbed up then we kind of reached a path again and took a route south along a rather beautiful glen, very quiet, very desolate, up to the Kwa Nan Fac. Wonderful walking.
Very nice. This late afternoon walk through this beautiful glen, lots of deer, just very picturesque, very wild, nobody around, perfect walking really.
And we've pitched our tent in a lovely spot just next to a little bit of sandy beach on a little grassy ledge, looking out over the loch. Perfect. Lots of deer tracks. They obviously come down to drink late in the evening or early in the morning, so maybe we might see something spectacular later. Anyway, we're going to leave you now and have our meal and look forward to day 2. Well, it's day 2 and we've woken up to the most extraordinarily beautiful Scottish morning. The water on the loch is absolutely still. It's like a sheet of glass. The sky is blue. A little bit of mist burning off on the tops of the mountains. And there's a kind of lovely pinkish glow all around the sky. And providing this stays like this for the next couple of hours, we're going to have a wonderful couple of hours morning. So it just goes to show, a couple of days ago we were sitting at Inverness train station in the pouring rain, looking at the weather forecast thinking, ooh, we're in for a very wet start. But actually we've had one really good day's walking and the most beautiful morning to wake up to on day 2.
Well, it's the morning of the 11th, and thank you, Scotland. We woke up to glorious sunrise this morning. Sun was pouring through the door of the tent at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and it's been dry and not a breeze during the night. So much so that we've managed to sort ourselves out and pack up and do the usual things really on day 2. You know where you start to develop your own systems of where things should be, and we've reminded ourselves of how we did it last time and all this sort of thing. So we've now packed the bags a lot more efficiently.
But at the moment, the cloud is fairly high. I can see blue sky between the cloud, a reasonable amount of it. I can even see sunlight and shadows and things. So it looks very, very good for the start of day 2. We're about to head to the top of the pass now, which is about 50 metres from where we've camped. Take a sharp right and then head up to the top, which we think is going to be a bit boggy. But hey, when the weather's like this, it's not a problem. So let's see how we get on at the beginning of day 2. Well, it's 11:20 now. We finally made it to Loch Nan Yun, which is half surrounded by whatever it is, 7-foot, 8-foot deer fences. So it's been pretty hard traversing the side that we've decided to take round it to head across past all the corries. Breakfast's on. What's for breakfast, Rosie?
Oats so simple with some fruit brittle.
Oat so simple with some fruit brittle and fruit brittle. How did you make that, Rosie?
Fruit brittle. Basically, it's a pureed fruit that you then put on a hydrator and you leave it longer than a leather so as it goes brittle.
Are you saying you forgot that it was on there?
No, I'm sure it's quite deliberate, but it works really well actually. So.
Yeah, it's really nice actually, really nice and crunchy. You could put it with ice cream, except we don't have any. But with breakfast it should be good. So we've got the peak ignition today, working on the 250 cylinder, so that's comparing that to yesterday's efficient performance of the jet boil system. Not doing as well as we'd hoped today time-wise, as I think we've already sort of said, that it's actually really hard going underfoot. Just lifting your knee so high all the time, and the feet rolling around with the ground. But it's not too wet now we're up here, and it's a very rocky. There's only little topsoil, so we haven't been hit by any deep peat bogs yet, etc., etc. Cloud is fairly low. I wouldn't say bad weather is coming in, but it doesn't look very promising. And everything is working as well as hoped, really. So we've got our little thermarest seats, and we're sitting comfortably now while this brews away and gets ready. And as you can tell, there is absolutely no wind at all, which is wonderful. But sadly, the midges have indeed found us once again. We're not talking very much, but it's just enough to have an occasional scratch, which is just irritating. But during the summer, it'd be pretty tough going, I think. Anyway, so that's this little ident at the moment. We will pick up the recorder a bit later on. We're heading across round, taking the rim of the rocks, taking the tops round to Invernate Forest, and then we're dropping down to the gully, which is starting to head towards Old Beath YHA, which we may stay at this evening or bypass it. We'll see how we go. But if today's progress is anything to go by, I have a feeling we might be staying there the night. Oh, one thing I did forget to say, which I'm sure most people will be curious about with these Terox, what was it like putting on wet shoes in the morning? Not only wet shoes, but wet socks. Last night when I finished, I washed the socks in the nearby stream, just gave them a swill and wrung them out, and I put on some of the Gerwool foot refreshing cream, which brightened my feet up a bit. But the feet weren't wet and wrinkly like you've been in a bath for a week. They were fine. And so this morning I put on some foot balm, or foot balm extra I think it's called. Squeezed the socks out once more. No water came out of them, but they were very wet and cold. Put them on, and there was a few moments of discomfort, but to be honest, once you start moving, your feet generate so much heat, it's actually very comfortable. And once again, the boots have been, the Terox have been very, very good, very easy to wear, and certainly my normal boots would have given my feet a lot more trouble by now with the rolling of the ankle over all these tussocks and so on. The Terox are taking a bit of a pasting. I noticed that the lovely surface of them are starting to get a little bit damaged, being caught in the heather. But so far, yeah, the jury is still on the positive side. A reasonably good walking experience, but certainly my feet, from experience in the last 3 years, I know that my feet are in much better condition than they would have been if I'd been using any of the assorted boots that I've had in the past.
Well, another fantastic day, as John Watson would say. It's a day for superlatives, Mark. It certainly was a game of two halves. We broke camp early morning and crossed over Brebdaig, I think, dropped down then to West Benula Forest and followed the tracks along to the southern western end of Loch Mulladock, and then walked down a fantastic little Glen Qualic, I think, crossing over the Beelach and then dropping down into Glen Affric, a couple of miles east of the youth hostel there. And from there we made our way along Glen Affric towards the loch. We had fantastic weather early on, but the weather changed a little bit in Glen Affric, and we bumped into a number of challengers who decided to pitch the tent for knots, but we pushed on and walked our way through the Glen Affric forest and then made our way towards Coogee Lodge, which was a long day. The climb up from the forest path towards the Coogee Lodge path took a long time, wet, cold and horrible. But we're now camped on the side of a little lochen just short of Coogee Lodge. Kate, what do you think of today?
Well, it's been a long day with quite a number of contrasts. This morning was just so perfect and still and just wonderful. By the time we've camped up tonight, it's raining in a drizzly sort of way, and it's a bit colder and a bit more overcast. So the weather's changed, but certainly the walk beside Loch Affric was just spectacular, absolutely beautiful, and the whole day has certainly been memorable and has been worth it.
Now, we had quite a long day planned today. I think it was about 25 kilometres, and in fact we walked for 10.5 hours. But sometimes when, the rain is coming down, it's not that heavy, you've still got a lot of daylight left, it kind of feels right to push on. How did that feel?
Yeah, I'm glad that we sort of achieved our objective. I don't know if I'm still a bit goal orientated, only a couple of days into the challenge, and whether I'm going to kind of chill out a bit as the days go by. But it was nice to achieve our objective for the day, and to know that because we've got another fairly long day planned tomorrow, and it's nice to know that it's not any longer than that which we had planned, and we'll end up at Fort Augustus tomorrow. So we kind of need to be there on time.
And that means the end of the Northwest Highlands.
Well, you've been explaining to me that there's going to be quite a changed landscape as we move from west to east, and already I can start to see how some of the landscape's changing, and we've had our first taste of Caledonian forests this afternoon and this evening, and so I'm looking forward to the way in which the country does, and the countryside around us does change as we move across it.
Yes, it certainly does. Now, the weather forecast tomorrow is probably a little bit like it is this evening, so I think it might be another trudge, hopefully not through too much mud, and certainly a big part of the walk looks as if it's downhill tomorrow, which will be welcome. Anyway, we'll catch up with you tomorrow.
Mind your step as you come down there. Well, it's 10 to 7 in the evening, and we've come through the gully. Well, let's go back a bit first. What would we talked to you? We talked micro navigation, I think. Anyway, eventually got off that mountain, came down through the forest as we originally intended. That was a good track, came down there. And at the bottom of the forest, the sun was threatening to come out. It's actually turned quite pleasant, although virtually in every direction there were clouds and drizzle, which had been coming and going really all morning. I think it was about 2 o'clock, 2:30 we got there. So anyway, there's a lovely bridge over a river, which we decided to stop at and have lunch, which consisted of couscous and assorted dried bits. And I was going to do a podcast from there, and tell you all about the food we were eating and what we were doing and how we were using it. But sadly it started to rain again, and it really came down with a real persistent jobby. So we just managed to eat our food, and of course as soon as the rain stopped and the humidity went up, out came the midges by the dozen. And it was one of those situations where, as people will know, when you get these things all over your face and your hair and your ears, up your nose, and you just want to pack and go, and you're worried you left something behind and nothing goes back in the rucksack the way that it came out, and you get into a real bother because these things just drive you insane. Anyway, we came out of there, hang a left up to the gully that drops over to Glenafric, and gully reminded me a bit of the Larry Grew actually, because it was a boulder field, very small version of the Larry Grew, but still a very steady climb, and would have been pleasant on a nice day. However, it rained.
And rained.
And so it was just the humidity, wasn't it? It was high humidity. So it was raining, and we had our wet weather gear on, but we had all the zips open, all the fronts open.
Base layer only.
Just base layer only, and it was still just muggy, horrible. So consequently, really, at the end of the day, here we are now. We've come down from the gully. As I say, it's almost 7 o'clock, and we're starting to head towards Alt Beath YHA, which we are hoping desperately have A, some space for the night, and B, some space for us. With the challenge, with the challenge, you register for how many temporary youth hostel membership tickets you want, and guess who left them at home? To be honest, I don't care, as long as we get somewhere warm and dry, because everything seems to be just soaked, and yet we've not been in a complete downpour. It's just been a real persistent drizzle.
Very wet underfoot though.
Sorry?
Very wet underfoot though.
Yes, very
wet.
It is in this valley, in this glen. It's really sodden. How are your feet? Are your feet all right in those boots?
Yeah, still dry, just.
So you got the Mendel boots?
Boots are absolutely sodden. I think my feet are dry.
And,
I don't know.
And I remembered I had some gaiters, which I got specially for these Terox, which were some raid light gaiters, which were designed for desert runners. And the reason that I thought I'd get them, and I'd forgotten I had, to be honest, was to stop the crud getting to the top of my shoes, because I found I've had to stop from time to time, as you would expect, going through all that heather, and just sharp bits of heather and so on just get caught into the ankle of the shoe, and it just becomes a discomfort. Anyway, since I put the gaiters on, which was probably after the last chat at the top of the hills there, top of the mountain, it's been wonderful. And although my feet are fairly wet from the conditions that we're in, I haven't had to stop to remove rubbish from my socks. So I shall look forward to seeing what state they're in tonight. So these raid light gaiters are very simple. They're like ankle socks really, with a normal gaiter clip that clips over the front. Can you get across this one all right? Well, we're meandering along the path. I hope this is clear enough. I'm not too distorted. As you can hear, there's water everywhere. But as yet, none of us have ended face down into that. Anything else you want to add, Rose?
We haven't really stopped to refresh our feet. It's just in as much as big mistake, the waterproof trousers I've got, you can only put on if you take your boots off. And do consider this if you're buying waterproof trousers. Really buy some that if you walk with boots that will you can put on with your boots on, because it's been an absolute pain today with the rain, putting them on and putting them off. The only upside is that every time I've taken my boots off, I've been able to give them a quick massage and refresh, and put my socks and boots back on to put my waterproof's on or off.
In fact, that was something I did a lot last year with the boots, but
Yeah,
I haven't felt the need to refresh my feet in these.
Well, I've noticed because every stream we've got to, I've expected you to say, "Oh, let's stop and do our feet," and you haven't, and I'm thinking, but mine seem all right, so.
Well, if you need to, let me know.
Will do.
And I'll just carry on. Well, what's the weather conditions like? The weather condition, actually, it's brightened up, isn't it? It's always the same when you come into Glen Affric. Last time I came here, a couple of years ago, I came from Strathcarron, and the weather was much worse than it has been today. A real cold, bitter wind and horizontal rain. It was foul. And as soon as you stepped into Glen Affric, it was wonderful. And of course the YHA helps, having a roaring fire and great welcome, or it did then, so I'm just keeping my fingers crossed we're going to have the same thing again this time. So what I'll do is I'll sign off now. We were hoping to stop for a bit and talk about some of the... Where's the path gone? This way. Just stop and talk about food and some of the other gear that we're using, just to slowly go through the gear rather than it just be one long gear list, and give you feedback on the Go Light Pinnacle, which I'm using, and Rose's Gregory Jade, which on the whole we're both very pleased with, and we can see getting plenty of good use out of those. Anyway, as you can hear, I've got another very large stream to cross, and bear with me just a second. You all right there? Might be better over there for you. Live stream crossing from Podcast Bob. Let's hope he doesn't go in and make a fool of himself. Okay?
Yeah.
Right, well, we'll sign off now, and we'll come back on a bit later on, hopefully when we're warm and settled, and see if we can find somebody to chat to at the YHA, providing they've got room, of course.
That concludes this part of The Tale of Two Podcasters from the 2007 Rab TGO Challenge, brought to you by theoutdoorsStation.co.uk.